when you're ready, we can go into the whole Harkin Energy story.
Well, exactly. I want to spend a lot of time on Harkin because it's so complicated, and I want to start from the beginning and go through it, because to just glaze over the top, it's hard to understand it even if you get all the details, because it's so very complex. But before we leave UBS in present time, how did UBS encourage and assist wealthy Americans to hide their taxable income?
Well, again, the details are in our article, but essentially they literally encouraged these people to not pay their taxes, and they provided them with ways, essentially sort of cutout mechanisms for them to do that. They gave them advice on how you get the cash out of the country, how you disguise the transfers, and there was a whole elaborate sort of toolkit right out of espionage. So they were very much part and parcel of this, but there's much more than that. UBS has been under investigation by the state of Massachusetts, by a number of different states in the United States, for practices which are very similar actually to what Goldman now is being investigated for, where they would tell their clients one thing and then they would do the other, betting against their own advice, misleading clients. In some cases, they were playing several different sides of the same equation and collecting on the front and the back end, which you're really not supposed to do. They also were under investigation for money laundering in Brazil. Yes. As I described, one of their executives taken away in handcuffs was quoted in the Brazilian media as saying, "I'll never go to jail. Money talks in Brazil."
Right. What did he say? Something like, anybody who's got money in Brazil?
Anybody who's got money in Brazil doesn't go to jail. Well, which actually you could say that to some extent in the United States, because most of these people certainly don't go to jail. Bernard Madoff is... he had to do something so incredibly extreme and so brazen, because anything much less than that, and they don't do time.
I'm speaking with investigative journalist and author Russ Baker. He's the author of Family of Secrets, The Bush Dynasty, and it's got a new title. I guess you've changed it. I kept thinking that other people were wrong about that, but no, you've got a new title.
Right, I brought a copy here, which I'll pull out.
A new
it's
copy?
A long subtitle, but the title is Family of Secrets. The subtitle is The Bush Dynasty, America's Invisible Government, and the Hidden History of the Last 50 Years, because the book is about much, much more than the Bush family. Nobody really wants to hear any more about the Bushes, understandably, but there's much more to the story behind their rise, the tremendous influence that the family has had in the White House. 20 out of 28 years, a Bush was vice president or president, and then this continuing involvement that they have there. Robert Gates is one of their to me, I would describe him as one of their soldiers. He was he was a career CIA officer. George H.W. Bush brought him up and made him his CIA director. When H.W. left the White House and Clinton came in, they took him to Texas, and they made him the head of the George H.W. Bush Library, where they did a remarkable job of deleting and redacting things. I've spent some time in there. It's very hard to find almost anything that hasn't been blacked out.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, that was Robert Gates, and then he became president of the university there, A&M, and then they put him on all these boards of oil companies and various things, and so that he might have some comfortable nest egg. And then George W. Bush becomes president, and after he gets rid of Rumsfeld, he brings Gates back in at the suggestion of the father, I assume, and makes him the Secretary of Defense. Obama comes in with the change we can believe in, and he leaves him in as Secretary of Defense, as if there's nobody else. I think that was very shocking
that he kept Gates on as Secretary of Defense.
And very little discussion in the mainstream media about this sort of remarkable phenomenon, because, after all, when you look at the big problems out there, there are very few bigger than the economy and the situation in Afghanistan and Iraq, and there's that continuity.
Oh, exactly. Well, Russ, you mentioned the chapter in Family of Secrets, Quacking Duck, and that's an incredible chapter, and I want to go over that with you today, because that goes over the complex story of Harkin Energy in Texas, and it also brings in UBS, which we've just been discussing. So let's start at the very beginning of Harkin Energy. Now, that was just a regular oil and gas company, right? Been going along for 10 years, and it was owned by a man named Phil Phil Kendrick, right?
Right.
So now what about Phil? What happened there? I guess it was in, the mid to late 80s, the price of oil was depressed and he was having problems, right? And he traveled to Asia to find investors?
Yeah, early 80s already, the sort of bottom was falling out of the petroleum industry, and he was looking for investors. He was received a call from someone who said that he knew a man in New York who was looking for a company, and he ended up bringing him in, thinking that he would continue to run it. This man came in and took a stock position, got more and more and more stock, ended up becoming the chairman, and although they had told Kendrick that no matter what happened, they would let him continue to run an important subsidiary overseas, they basically pushed him out, and all these strange things started happening.
Right. Well, now, when he was in either Indonesia or somewhere, he heard the name of William Quasha, right? And then when he got back to the States, he was contacted out of the blue by this man's son, Alan Quasha, right? A New York or Washington, D.C. attorney who offered to buy him out and take control of the board of Harkin, right?
Right. What Quasha was doing was he was buying, the younger Quasha was buying up companies that had a good name that he could get very, very cheaply. He's been written about by Time Magazine and Fortune and so on, and they were all sort of scratching, the Wall Street Journal, scratching their heads because the company was sort of strange. He bought up Harkin, and all this money started coming in, and I tried to figure out where it was coming from. Certainly some payments for some of the stock was coming from Caribbean accounts and so forth. But as you point out, Quasha's father, Kendrick had heard about Quasha's father, and the father had lived his entire adult life in the Philippines,
right?
Where he, by all indications, was quite sympathetic to and very friendly with Ferdinand Marcos, the dictator there, and the kleptocrat, the man who stole probably as much as any leader in modern history, a lot of it U.S. aid, and then a lot of it just from the Philippine people who, if it hadn't been for him, they wouldn't be necessarily impoverished significantly because they're so full of resources.
He stole billions of dollars from
billions and billions and billions. And of course they ended up buying, hundreds of buildings in Manhattan alone. They had all of this fabulous art collection, and we know about his wife Imelda's collection of thousands of pairs of shoes. Anyway, so the Quasha family was connected to Marcos. Mr. Quasha, the senior, was an attorney there, also represented somebody from something called the Nugan Hand Bank, which is now forgotten, but it was a murky bank that had sort of CIA ties. They got in trouble. The head of the bank committed suicide, supposedly, was found in his car. Lots of strange things going on abroad, right out of a John le Carré novel, but very much real.
Well, now this Alan Quasha is the head of Harkin Energy, okay, and all of this money is flowing in out of, like you say, nowhere, some trusts in the Bermuda or the Bahamas or somewhere. But the thinking is, the speculation is this was money that was stolen from the Philippines, right?
There was a conjecture that this money was coming. It didn't seem like he himself had these kind of resources, or that he would have put them into this small company that wasn't at that time profitable. And so the issue was, where was this money generated from? Mr. Kendrick had heard a rumor that this money was Marcos's, and I'm not saying it was. I don't know for certain. But in any case, so this money started flowing into this company, and it grew from, I don't remember the exact figures, a few million to literally like $1 billion in assets in a few short years. And the reason we're talking about this company, by the way, is because several years later, it would bail out a man named George W. Bush, unsuccessful oil man. He had a company that was losing money. It was bailed out. I described this in Family of Secrets, bailed out by a bigger company, which is a strange outfit that there is the complexion of some sort of intelligence connections there. That company then failed and was bailed out by Harkin, which then gave George W. Bush a bunch of money, put him on the board, and gave him a lucrative salary, and basically didn't expect him to do much of anything except go off to Washington and help run his father's presidential campaign in 1988. Now, what's interesting about Harkin is who was involved there.